Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be talking about loops. The most common use for a loop is to iterate over a collection. There are four types of loops that we can create: for loop, for each loop, while loop, and do while loop. To create a for loop, we would type for, then parentheses, int I equals 0. Now I is the variable name, it's just a placeholder for integer, but it's most common that when you see a for loop, it'll be an I. Then we put a semicolon. I is less than the length of the collection that we want to iterate over. And then another semicolon, then I++, and curly braces for a code block. So the way this is going to read is create an integer 0 and check if that integer is less than the length of the array, which in this case is 4. There's 4 elements in the array, that is the length. So is 0 less than 4? Yes. Execute all this code inside this block, which currently we have none, and then add 1 to I at the end of that. So now I will become 1. Is 1 less than 4? Yes. So execute the code, increment I by 1, and then now I equals 2. Is 2 less than the length of the array? And so on. Now we could loop through the array and perform some kind of action. So for example, we could check if I equals 3. Let's change the number of the element at index 3 in the num array. So to do that, we can access our element by using num array and putting in the index. So let's put I and set that equal to a new value that we'll say is 10. Now this is going to loop through. I is going to equal 0. If 0 is less than the num array, run this code. So does I equal 3? No. Skip this code. Increment I. Now I equals 1. I is less than the length of the array. I is 1. It's less than the length of the array. Run this code. I does not equal 3, so skip this code. So on and so forth until it gets to the last number in the array. It will equal 3, and it will change that value to 10. And what I can do is after the if statement, I can put console.writeLine, and I can put the value of the num array I. And you can see it skips 8 and prints 10 because we changed it right here. When I hit 3, it changed the value of the num array at I, which equals 3, and it set the value to 10. So it changed this value. It overwrote that value. The next type of loop you'll see is a for each loop. I'm going to delete all this code. And instead of using an array for our collection, I'm going to use a list. So I'm going to type list, and in this case I'll use strings. Why not? And I'll call this names, and I'll pluralize it because it's a collection of names. And I'll set it equal to, remember for a list you have to type new list string and put parentheses. Now instead of setting this equal to an empty collection, we're just going to put a semicolon here. This is how we'll create an empty list that has nothing inside of it that's waiting for us to add something to it. Now here on the next few lines, I'm just going to add a few names to the list. So I'm going to put some strings in here, and I'm going to do Mary, and I'll do names.add Bobby, and I'll do names.add Frankie. I don't know, I just made these up. These aren't people I know. So to do a for each loop, we're going to say for each, and we're going to put our parentheses, and we're going to put our curly braces, and inside the parentheses, we're going to put the data type that's inside the list, so string, name in names. So it's pretty easy to understand. For each string name in the collection names, we want to do something. So let's just print console.writeLine, and inside we will put name. The singular name, not the plural names, which is the name of the collection, but the individual name. We're defining this variable right here, name. It's for each name in names, I want to print out the name. So you'll see what happens. It simply prints out each name. So the next loop we're going to talk about is a while loop. So I'm going to delete all this code, and I'm going to create a new integer called count, and I'm going to set it equal to 0. To create a while loop, we write while, and then parentheses, and then curly braces. Again, just like an if statement or a for loop. And we put in here a condition that is to be evaluated to true. So for example, we could say, while count is less than 10, I want to do something. So let's write to the console. This is the count. And we'll append the count on there. So even though this is an integer, we can concatenate it because inside of this console.writeLine, it'll convert this to a string for me first, and then it will concatenate to this and print it out. Now the last thing we have to do is increment the count by 1. If we don't do this, the count will always stay at 0 and the loop will run forever, and you don't want that. So if we run it now, you could see when it got to 10, it stopped and it did not execute the code as soon as this hit 10 because this became false and then it moved on to the end of the application. Of course, we can move the increment above the console.writeLine and then it'll print 1 to 10 instead. Again, this is because we're incrementing the count first and then printing it here. So the last type of loop I want to talk about is a do-while loop. It's very similar to the while loop, but the only difference is first you write do and then you put curly braces, and then underneath these curly braces you put your while statement. So let's say while count is less than 10. And close it with a semicolon. What this enables is that this code will always execute first and then check the condition. So this code will always execute. So if I say console.writeLine count, it should print 11 and then evaluate whether this is true or not. So it prints 11, evaluates that it was actually false, and the program terminates. And just so I'll set this back to 0, and we need to make sure we raise the count, and then run. Alright guys, that just about does it for this video. Hope you guys are enjoying it. We'll be back soon with the next one, so we'll see you next time.